Welcome to the Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup Podcast. If someone in your life has BPD, you know how difficult it can be, and you need to learn how to heal from those toxic relationships. And that's where this show comes in. Expert education, expert knowledge, expert insight, and delivered with compassion and empathy. With your host, counselor and trauma recovery coach, AJ Mahari. To purchase and book sessions with AJ, go to ajmahari.ca. Now your host, AJ Mahari.
A couple things before we start this episode. I have a website for this podcast, and it's at survivingbpdrelationshipbreakup.com. Interactive website. It's a website is its own feed for the podcast and also for my YouTube channel. So if you'd like to get a lot of the videos that aren't in this podcast, you'd like to check those out, you can do that at survivingbpdrelationshipbreakup.com. I would just like to encourage you to please leave a 5-star rating for this podcast if you find it helpful, to help this podcast keep growing and keep reaching more and more people who could benefit from this content. I get a lot of people with BPD rating it at 1 star because, they have all these problems with what I'm saying, and they think it's horrible and disgusting and all that kind of BPD kind of stuff. This podcast website is survivingbpdrelationshipbreakup.com. And now, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back to the Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup Podcast. And in this episode, I'm going to feature part 1 of a series of 3 podcast episodes about men with borderline personality disorder. And in part 1, the Broken BPD Man Fantasy, I'm going to be talking about just that and the illusion so many women fall into when they love a borderline man, whether you're knowing that or not. This is the first part of a 3-part series, like I said, on borderline men. In this episode, I'll look at why women get pulled in, why they stay, and what it costs them. Then, in the next episode, I'll unmask the borderline man himself and uncover the 7 raw realities that you really need to know. And there'll be a 3rd part, but I'll say what that one's about in the 2nd part. The episode after this. An introduction to this episode. Today I'm exploring something deeply painful yet important to name. The Broken BPD Man Fantasy. This is the illusion that many women hold on to when they're in a relationship with a man with borderline personality disorder. It's the fantasy that your love, your sacrifice, your endless patience can somehow, quote, heal, unquote, the borderline man, make him whole, and finally bring the relationship into harmony. I want you to know, if you've been caught in this type of relationship, it's not your fault, or maybe you still are caught in the relationship. Society, culture, and your own childhood conditioning may have set you up to believe that what the borderline male has to offer is somehow love. But today, I'm going to gently pull apart why this fantasy takes root, what keeps women trapped inside of it, and the very real costs of staying loyal to a broken man who cannot love you the way you deserve to be loved. Part 1 in this episode. What is the Broken BPD Man Fantasy? The fantasy is built on a belief that a man's brokenness makes him somehow more worthy of devotion, that his suffering, his volatility, and his emptiness can be redeemed by the right woman's love. It's the story of, quote, if I can just hold on through his storms, he'll finally realize I'm the one who truly understands him, unquote. This fantasy is not about who he really is. It's about the illusion of who you believe he could become. If only you could give enough, endure enough, or prove yourself enough. Part 2. Why women fall into the BPD broken man trap. Caretaker conditioning is one major reason. Women are socialized to nurture, fix, and heal. When faced with a man who is emotionally raw, self-destructive, or vulnerable, many women instinctively feel it's their duty to save him. And also the intensity mistaken for passion, his possessiveness, his anger, his jealousy, outbursts, they can feel like passion, like proof that he cares deeply. The adrenaline rush of chaos gets confused with chemistry. And thirdly, here, the wounded hero archetype. That's the borderline male. Our culture romanticizes the broken man who is redeemed by love. From Beauty and the Beast to countless films and books, the narrative says, quote, he was dark and damaged until she healed him, unquote. And also in this recipe of being with a BPD male, maybe not even knowing it, but going through all that means one's going to go through, often has to do with maternal instincts. When he falls apart, threatens to leave, or spirals into despair, can awaken maternal instincts. The sense that you cannot abandon him because he needs you to survive. And nothing plays more heavily on maternal instincts than many a borderline male who is, of course, a young boy in a man's body, even in more need of a mother figure. And your childhood wounds. If you grew up with emotionally unavailable, unpredictable, or unstable caregivers, or an emotionally unstable caregiver, his chaos might feel strangely familiar. The part of you still hoping to fix your father or earn your mother's love may replay in this relationship. And part 3, the cost of staying in the fantasy. And the cost of staying in the fantasy has 5 parts to it. The first one being loss of self. You stop living for your own needs and dreams. Your identity becomes wrapped around managing his moods, calming his rage, or rescuing him from his latest crisis. And the second aspect of the cost of staying in the fantasy with a borderline male, the erosion of safety. What begins as, quote, passion, unquote, often turns into fear. Fear of his anger, his abandonment, his volatility, fear of his control. Your nervous system becomes exhausted. And thirdly, confusion about love. Real love is steady, respectful, and mutual. But the fantasy tricks you into believing that chaos is intimacy and suffering must have something to do with loyalty. Fourthly, the cost of staying in the fantasy is prolonged trauma bonding. The cycle of abuse and reconciliation deepens your attachment to the trauma bond. The worse he treats you, the harder you fight to win those good intermittent reinforcement moments again and again. And lastly, in this section of what it costs for women to be with the borderline man, delayed healing. As long as you remain in the fantasy, your own wounds, codependency, self-abandonment, and unhealed childhood pain cannot be addressed. You remain locked in survival mode instead of true growth. And part 4, breaking the fantasy. Breaking the fantasy of the borderline male means facing the painful truth. He is not a project. He is a person. And if that person is not capable of healthy love, no amount of sacrifice will change that. It requires courage to grieve the dream you built, to let go of the fairy tale ending, or even the fairy tale middle, and to reclaim your own story. Healing starts when you realize that your worth is not measured by how much pain you can endure and how much you can sacrifice yourself for the borderline man. And in closing, my hope is that today's conversation helps you see the Broken BPD Man Fantasy for what it really is, an illusion that keeps you trapped in someone else's chaos. You are not here to save a man from himself. You are here to love and to be loved in return with respect, safety, and mutual care. Take this truth with you gently. Real love doesn't demand you rescue someone else. Real love frees you to be yourself. Real love doesn't mean that you live with a man who tries to tell you that you can't talk to any other male person on the planet, or who tries to, in really abusive ways, control you, all because he can't be an adult. And as always, I hold you in compassion and care. May you find the courage to step out of the fantasy and into the truth that sets you free. And I'm out here to work with you to help you do that if I'll resonate with you. And this was part 1 of a 3-part series on men with BPD and what women are going through and need to know more about. The Broken BPD Man Fantasy. If this episode resonated with you, be sure to listen to the next episode in this podcast of the series, Borderline Men Unmasked. That's where I'll take a closer look at the borderline man himself, the rage, shame, addictions, and hidden struggles that shape these relationships with male borderlines. Understanding both the fantasy and the reality will give you the clarity you need to step out of the cycle. And like I said, I'm out here to work with you if I resonate with you also, because people do need help in this process of stepping out of the cycle and breaking the trauma bond. And my hope is that this brings you one step closer to knowing what you need to do to take care of you.
You've been listening to the Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup Podcast with your host, counselor and trauma recovery coach, AJ Mahari. For more or get sessions with AJ, go to ajmahari.ca. See you next time.